Welcome friends. So today we are going to discuss about another interesting technology called Hasura. And this technology has a very interesting name as well. So I think it's a combination of two words, and most prominent word is Asura, and which is in English what we call it as a daemon. And in case of Unix, what we call it is a process which runs in the background. So it is about the daemon process, and then the language called as Haskell. Samir, I think that's the language which is there.
Correct.
Yeah, Haskell.
That influenced it.
And influence it. So it's like a combination word, and then using that they have coined this word. So they have a very interesting logo and this interesting name. And another interesting thing about this technology and company is it has origins in India. So they have an office in Bangalore and San Francisco. So very, very, very cool, interesting technology. So let's go to Samir to understand what really that technology is and how it is used. Yeah. So Samir, what Hasura is all about?
Right. Yeah, so I think we had one video earlier on GraphQL, right? And that just introduced a way of providing a kind of a standardized API layer, all that, right? We looked at that and do watch that video because it's like a precursor to Hasura. Hasura takes it to the next step now, right? It basically actually gives you a service. So it gives you API as a service. That's the approach which Hasura has taken. And then it utilize all the good things about GraphQL that we have looked at in the earlier one. And just to quickly touch upon it briefly, using GraphQL, you get a very standardized API layer instantly against your databases. That is what it gives you. It's flexible, which means it can easily map to your databases, etc. And it gives you better performance, etc. So it's standardized on that. But more than that, the most important part is typically we have two situations. One is you have a already running application with large database, and then you want to standardize and build your API layer, number one. Number two is you are starting from ground up. You have completely new modern databases with you. And then also you have the same problem that you want to rapidly build a standardized API layer, right? And API layer is what the CRUD operations, right? Option one we looked at it was traditionally build it using the REST APIs and do your development. As against that, we said GraphQL gives you fantastic standardization, but how do you generate that? And that is the problem that Hasura solves. That it can look either at your existing database. It could have 100 tables, 1,000 tables, whatever it is, and it can generate complex, based on your relationship, complex APIs instantly without any code, right? So it just generates the API layer for you. That's really the value proposition in a fast fashion, basically. And then it takes care of many other things which we'll talk about, like it gives you fantastic security and permission model. It tries to optimize the queries and things like that. So that is the main value proposition agency. Yeah. Metadata driven API.
Okay. So as I have understood, like typically for in any project, let's say suppose if you want to implement some data access layer API or a data layer API, then this technology will help us to build very fast and in a rapid manner, where it can look at the database schema and then generate the GraphQL schema and then help in running queries and etc. So that's what it does. So maybe for an existing database which is already there with lots of table, or when you are developing totally new and then you are also in a process of defining database, so there also it can be used.
Correct, exactly.
So basically it addresses basically the productivity part or a speed part of it. So how fast you can build the data part.
And productivity part is what you touched upon, right? It's very important because if you want to write hundreds of APIs in a standardized fashion with a lot of code reviews and a lot of reviews, designer reviews, it's a process by itself. It can just collapse all that effort basically for you into matter of minutes to hours. Basically.
Matter of minutes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this Hasura, like I was just reading this literature a little bit, and then they say that it's like what they support is what they call it as an instant API. It's a very fast and a standardized kind of API. So what exactly this instant API means?
Yeah. I think it's how they promote it, but it's literally instant. While I was also playing with it, first of all, it's all basically Hasura gives you almost like a UI on top of your database and databases, right? So and it basically sucks up all your RDBMS or database metadata and with that it knows how many things are there, how many tables are there, what are the relationship, foreign key relationship, primary key relationship. It sucks everything in, and then it gives you through a UI, it gives you a user interface. You can pick the tables and relationships against which you want to generate API. You click on it, it generates the API for you, and that's what it does. So by looking at a database metadata, it generates all other kind of metadata for you. So it's a completely metadata driven system. It generates your GQL metadata. That's what you can say.
Okay. So if you look at the schema and fast part of it. So if you look at the schema and then generate some kind of a structure, and maybe then you can play with it in a visual manner.
Completely visual manner.
Visual manner. Okay.
And then it generates when you click, essentially through click and this thing. Because how will you go to a database and make queries, right? Primary keys or join between the tables, right? Join between two tables, which is like a nested structure in your GQL, right? Graph query language, right? And then you can query based on some of the attributes, typical foreign key attributes and things like that, right? Or you could order things. So all of this, it generates automatically, and not just query. By the way, we also a little bit touched upon the mutation part of GraphQL. Mutation is nothing but the CUD, the create, update, delete. It can generate all of that for you as well, right? So it takes care of complete CRUD interface to point and click.
Complete entire. So it's not just select part of it, but I can create, update, delete, and everything that is
delete. And one step beyond that is subscription, which means if something changes, do let me know. That kind of a subscription model also, which is again GraphQL. It generates all of that for you.
Okay. And that is very fast and in a standardized manner. That's what it is.
You get the standardization, and standardization is driven by GraphQL syntax essentially, right?
Okay. Got it. But let's say if I have generated those APIs, but in any project or any application, actually we have some additional business logic as well. Like maybe we may like to combine the output of API, or maybe there is a pre-processing, post-processing. So is there any provision in Hasura for that, for implementing that or plugging that business logic?
Absolutely. And that is always a challenge. I think again in our earlier video on GraphQL, right, we said that pure GraphQL, if you look at it, it just gives you the schema and standardization, but it leaves it to you how to write the resolvers. In this case, Hasura goes one step ahead, right? So it obviously that is the case, but it basically goes to a step where it says, okay, if you want to execute your own, if you want to plug in your own business logic into it, and the business logic could be written anywhere, right? In any language, any hosting platform. So my business logic need not be in JavaScript. It could be in Java, it could be in Go, it could be in Python, whatever, right? I might be running it on Docker, or I might have hosted it on AWS, things like that. Doesn't matter. You plug that in, essentially. So you can hook in your logic through a mechanism called as actions. Okay, so Hasura has actions, and using those actions, you can plug in your logic. Before the database changes are made, let's say in case of mutation.
And does it also combines the output of multiple APIs and then generate something like, is that also
exactly
supported?
So you can think of it like a flow where you make a API call, which is exposed API in GraphQL, right? And then it takes over, then it can make a call to whatever webhook you have put in through the actions, and then you are probably manipulating some data, right, in that. So it will take that data, it will take the data that has come in, and it will combine all of that, and then it will kind of persist in case of persistence. In case of persistence. Right? And you have an option there, right? You can do this in async fashion, or you can do it in sync fashion also. Typically in our business logic is plugged in a sync fashion, right? But you could trigger something off on the sidelines and then go to your database to make the changes.
Okay. And what about post triggers? Like something like, let's say if an order is created, then I would like to do something. So maybe inform my
some
delivery.
Summaries, or send notification and things like that. And that's a post action, right? Absolutely. I think because if you look at our business tier, a lot of things you do before and a lot of things also you do now after, right? So this post execution is also taken care of by something called as event triggers. Okay. So if a particular database table, a particular row has changed, right? You can that's a trigger. So those who have worked in databases and know about triggers, it's exactly like that. So you have create, update, delete triggers, you can say, and then based on that you can take actions. And you can go as finer as, comparing if a value of a particular column has changed. For example, a quantity is increased, or there is a credit, or credit value is more than something, then do something. Things like that. If you want to, you could still plug it in. So that is the event trigger.
Plug it in. So by maybe reorder level.
Exactly. Reorder levels of inventories and things like that.
Inventories and all that is possible. Okay. So got it. So you have so basically till now what I was just trying to summarize. So you may have an existing database or a new database. So one can create a data layer API and then also plug in business logic. So typically it is taking care of the business logic as well as data access part of
the thing. Exactly. And see, this is important for existing applications. It's not that you have just the database table, right? It's not that you have 1,000 tables. You probably have 100 procedures written, right? In any one of the popular languages, Java, Go, JavaScript, Node.js, whatever, Python, any of that can be plugged in, and that's a great valuation.
Great thing. Yeah, fine. Okay. But then this is about API and business logic. But what about security and the authentication, authorization kind of thing? Correct. So is there any? Because if that is outside, then managing that is also challenging. Actually,
challenge. No, in fact, not just that. Exactly. I think. I'm sure. I think about 20 to 30% of the logic many times that we write as a business logic has some element of security, right? And then we have these great structures we create for row level security managements or for role managements and whatnot, right? So RLS roles is a very common thing. This all becomes now declarative in case of Hasura. So you can actually declare while you're building your schema, essentially GraphQL schema. You can actually give the declarative security, using which you can say only these roles can access, or only this particular row can be modified by the current user. So there are two things to refer. Either you are referring to a particular column, a set of columns in your data model or in your relationships. So if I have a customer and order details, based on the order details, I can have some row level security, or based on order, I can have order value, I can have some security, or based on who am I in terms of when I have logged in, do I have particular roles? Do I belong to a particular group? So my properties, user properties. So by combining this, whatever complicated models we used to have in our enterprise applications, all those can be addressed to a large extent by Hasura. Hasura Declarative Security. Yeah.
And does it also provide, because typically one may have external auth providers like OAuth and Azure AD and all that. Is that also it supports?
Very good question, because existing application will always have their pre-built authentication provider, right? And maybe you are using Okta, or maybe you are using Azure AD, and very valid question. So that's also good. I think there is an external authentication provider support in Hasura. Limited ones, but standard ones like Okta is there, Auth0 is there, Azure AD is there. Clockwork, key clock is there, and things like that.
Key clock. And what about masking and encryption of data? Because if the data is coming from different sources, does it have a layer of protecting that data in between, or it is left to the database to protect it?
Database, I'm sure everybody takes care of it anyways, and that's a bare bone level of protection. But in Hasura, again, through declarative security, you can take care of these 2-3 things. One is you can mask the data that is kind of going back and forth through API, or you can tokenize it. In case of GDPRs, we typically tokenize it, right? And the last stage is PII data is encrypted, right? So when it is on the wire, the personally sensitive data can be encrypted as well. So it takes care of all these 3 things through a data model through declarative security. Which is, I would say, an adequate level of security that you could expect. Pretty strong there as well, because no business layer can be built without adequate security, right? Especially if you're exposing public APIs, then
public APIs, absolutely. Great. So I think it's a wonderful technology, and then very proud that it has Indian roots in our own Silicon Valley in Bangalore. So
a lot of learnings have gone in. I think that's what we can say.
A lot of learnings, and I think it is open source also. In 2018, I believe it is open source. Yeah. So one can
open source, and it is available in both the flavors that you want, right? The hosted flavor, Hasura Cloud, is there, as well as there is a Hasura Enterprise Edition, Hasura E, which is basically a containerized way. So you can build the containers, get the containers out, and then deploy wherever, on-prem or in AWS through Kubernetes, or all of that you can do basically.
Okay. Great. So just before closing our session, so what are there any things which one has to keep in mind while adopting this technology, or before going
Surely.
ahead, what one should be aware of?
Correct. Surely. I think this is relatively new compared to all our older technologies. So it's very promising, I would say, but there are a few things to worry about. And when I was playing, as well as when I was looking at the community and those who have used it in a large extent, right? What they were saying is, the positive sides of it is that it auto generates a lot of things for you, right? Including the GQL syntax. Because when you are making a query, right, your query is a complex query, and it's now going to go and fetch from 2 or 3 tables. Now we know, I mean, if you have worked on databases, we know, right, there are 2-3 optimized ways of getting it, right? Now the auto-generated ways may or may not be the most optimized ways, right? So if you have those hundreds of queries flying around, right, you still have to go and inspect and study and figure out how to tune them further, right? So the magic that it does, there is also possible false sides. So just one is to be very cautious about that, so that you get the highly performant queries, right? There is a work there. That's point number 1.
Okay.
Essentially, yeah. And point number 2 is we talked about the schema mapping, right? Looking at your database schema, it generates your GQL schema, right? And based on your relationships, foreign key and other things, it's trying to map. Whatever syntax it generates in that schema is what you use finally when you dereference fields and use them in the order by or wherever, right? It is you have to really study that, because it's a generated schema, so there are some idiosyncrasies in terms of underscore IDs and a few extra brackets here and there. So it's not very clean, I would say. I'm sure Hasura must be working on that further, but this is one feedback I have seen from the heavy hard-hitting community users. So that's the second point.
Okay.
And then lastly, what also we have seen that this is fantastic, and you have generated your fast APIs, your new database or old database, and then comes a time after a year or a year and a half where you want to move a part of it or all of it to another modern database which is more suitable for you, right? That's a migration effort. So there are a few things in Hasura for migration, but is it battle tested or not? Because basically it has generated a schema and it has generated a mapping. You like it or not, it is still a kind of a tight binding, okay, to whatever level. So when you're moving around, now maybe the GraphQL syntax changes, right? In that case, or all this mapping, the idiosyncrasies of schema that we talked about, that changes. If you use any specifics, right? Let's say I'm using Postgres and I could use some specific SQL function in Postgres also. Now, if you have done that, there is a migration effort. So either way, there is a migration effort. One has to be very cautious about that. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Awesome. So great. So overall, very interesting technology.
Very promising.
So friends, so hope, very promising. So friends, we feel you have you got a little bit of introduction of this technology, and then maybe if you want to explore further, then we'll keep on providing some links about further topics of Hasura. So if you have liked our video, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and also please do subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Keep watching.
Thanks. Bye.